I will not be silent. Your lies end tonight.
Silence is the only place people like you deserve.
I'm faced worse than your threats, and I'm still standing.
Then watch as power crushes your defiance into dust.
V. The silence after their clash was sharper than any blade. Every eye in the shadows waited to see who would bend first, courage or control. Monica stood tall, but the weight of authority pressed down like a storm about to break. Was her defiance the beginning of justice, or the spark of a darker reckoning? And this is only the beginning. The next chapter will strike harder than anyone expects. If her stand moves you, write truth in the comments and follow to witness what comes next. The morning chill pressed against the glass of the Civic Tower and slipped inside every time the revolving doors turned. People hustled through in wool coats and sensible shoes, shaking off the lake wind as they made for the elevators. The marble floor shone like a frozen river under the chandeliers, and the building's holiday garlands had just begun to appear. Pine, discreet lights, a ribbon or two the color of cranberries. Monica Harris guided her cart across that river with the quiet rhythm of someone who understood the building better than most, who owned badges to it. She moved with care wheels aligned to the seams in the tile. Mop had rung until it left only a whisper of moisture, a small sign placed at an angle that caught the eye without scolding. The scent of lemon cleaner met the darker perfume of coffee from the kiosk near the windows, where a barista called out names and people tipped with folded singles, murmuring thanks out of habit. Outside, the sky hung low and pewter, hinting at the first stubborn flurries of the season. She liked this early hour. It belonged to routine security greetings, the hum of an escalator warming up, the reliable creak of brass door handles. She wished her life could be mostly that, care taken with small things, the grace of order. She had learned to value that after years of living by checklists and the edge of moments when seconds decided everything. Now, in a city where the days were measured by time clocks and transit schedules, she aimed for a quieter ledger. The sizzle in the air when the thermostat kicked on, the neat line of shoe prints that faded as the floor dried, the way light pooled around the information desk, all of it settled her. Morning, the security officer said from his podium, stamping his feet gently for warmth. He was young, cheeks pink from the wind that followed people through the loop of doors. Morning, Ethan, she answered without lifting her gaze from the square of floor she was finishing. Her voice carried a steady warmth that matched the lobby's glow. Feels like November finally made up its mind, he added, watching his breath cloud and vanish each time the door swung. You staying warm? I am. She set the mop back in his cradle and straightened the little yellow sign. How's your grandmother? He blinked, surprised. She remembered. She's all right. Doctor says the new medicine's working. Thanks for asking. She nodded. The kid tried. He held doors, learned names, made eye contact. In a building where many people looked past the ones who kept it running, he saw them. From the coffee counter, a conversation drifted over. Two assistants chatted about Thanksgiving menus and whose cousins would arrive on which day. Pumpkin pie or pecan, stuffing with cornbread or sourdough, the price of cranberries compared to last year. Someone laughed about waiting in a line on Michigan Avenue for a doorbuster sale, bragging about patience they did not have. It was the city's music. Plans, prices, polite disagreement, an undercurrent of hurry. Monica finished the last pass and checked the clock above the elevators. She had time to do the brass rails, to make them glow so the day would begin with a hint of polish people might not notice but would feel. She reached for the cloth and the bottle of cleaner, and in that same moment felt the lobby shift. It was like the air had a hinge hidden somewhere and the hand had swung it. Voices dimmed, footsteps slowed. Richard Whitmore entered with two executives in his wake, and a woman trailing with a tablet in her arms. His coat was expensive and unnecessary. He never stayed outside long enough to need it. He moved as if the building adjusted itself to accommodate him, as if elevators arrived a breath sooner and doors opened a shade wider. His smile carried a little brightness that never warmed anything it touched. Monica registered him the way a person notices a new crack in a familiar wall. Not surprising, not welcome. He was talking about a new lease, the way one talks about weather, certain the sky would do as predicted. Then he stopped. His gaze found a small sign on the marble and the wet shine that stretched like a slender crescent across the path he preferred. He also found her. The pause that followed was not long, but it was long enough for people in the lobby to look up, then look down again, practicing the city's art of seeing without staring. "Really?" he said, and his voice carried just enough to belong to someone used to being heard. "Right across the entrance?" Monica kept her eyes on the rail, rubbing with slow circles until the brass gave back the light. "Floor will be dry in a moment, sir," she said, steady and respectful. He looked at her cart, at the bucket that did not drip, at the neatness of the tools. He was searching for something she had done wrong. Finding nothing, he shifted to what he thought she was. "We have clients coming through here," he said. "Perhaps the staff could be trained to do this before or after business hours." "It is before for many," she replied, cloth moving, voice even. "I placed the sign so no one slips." "No." One of the executives cleared his throat and inspected his watch. The woman with the tablet shifted her weight and pretended to scan her notes. Ethan's posture changed by a degree so small most would miss it. Attention tightened like a rope. Richard stepped closer, the polished toe of his shoe catching a sliver of the damp. He did not slip. He wanted to be seen, almost slipping. "I'm not interested in excuses," he said, the smile fading into something thinner. "I'm interested in standards." "Then we agree," she said. "That's why I'm here early." There was the faintest tremor in the lobby, a held breath, a rested note on the piano that might be struck. People in long coats angled their bodies to take the farther elevator bank. Not because they needed those elevators, but because it gave them reason to pass this scene from a distance. The coffee machine hissed like a kettle that knew when to be quiet. He dropped his voice and sharpened it at the same time. "Do you know who I am?" She set the bottle on the cart and folded the cloth neatly, aligning edges that had no reason to be aligned, except that someone believed dignity lived in small acts. Then she looked at him. "I know you signed a lot of things," she said. "I know you want the building to look good." Something flickered in his eyes, the irritation of a man not used to conversation that did not confirm him. "People like you," he began, and the phrase already clanged, "are supposed to keep to their place. There is a way things are done." There it was, not subtle, not new. The words carried the dust of old rooms and the tidy comfort of categories. Monica had heard sentences like this in different shapes, fitted to different uniforms. A long time ago, they had come in harsher forms. Now, they wore better suits and gentler verbs. They still meant the same thing. "My place," she said, letting the words be as soft as possible without bending, "is doing my work with care, same as anyone's." A man in a charcoal coat who had been pretending to read his phone stopped pretending. The barista's hand paused over the chain drawer. Somewhere in the building, a printer stuttered and fell silent. Ethan was very still. Richard's smile was gone. The pleasant mask he wore for donors, for ribbon cuttings, slid a fraction, and the machinery beneath showed. "You think a mop and a smile makes you the equal of everyone who walks in here?" he asked. The cruelty in it was polished, almost kind in appearance, the way eyes can be lovely and still break bone. She did not answer with a speech. She did not have to. She kept her gaze level and calm, and the quiet itself said a great deal. People who do not shout learn how to be heard anyway. He took one step closer. The scent of his cologne weighed cherry and cedar in the air. "You don't belong in conversations about leases and partners and numbers that matter," he said. "You belong over there." He gestured toward the cart as if pointing to a corner, as if pointing to a lower rung on a ladder he thought he owned. "Good morning," Linda Chan said, arriving like weather can arrive unexpected, grounding. She stood just to the side of Richard, coat unbuttoned, hair touched by the outside wind. "There's a 9 o'clock with the legal team on the 20th floor. They're waiting." He did not turn to her immediately. Power prefers to finish its sentence. When he did turn, the pleasant smile snapped back into place with the crispness of a light switch. "Of course," he said. "Let's not keep them." To Monica, he added, "Have this cleaned properly." It was not an instruction, it was a parting shot. "It is clean," she said. He held her gaze for a beat that might have been challenge, might have been warning, and then walked toward the elevators. The woman with the tablet hurried after him, her eyes briefly apologizing to no one in particular. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if he had been keeping very still underwater. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. I'm fine, Monica said. She picked up the cloth again and worked a small circle into the last dull patch on the rail until it shone. Thank you. People heard him, he added. That was, he searched for the right word and chose one that did not inflame, unnecessary. The elevator doors closed on Richard and his entourage. The lobby remembered its music. Conversations warmed back up. The coffee machine sighed with relief. Linda lingered at a respectful distance and then stepped near enough for her words to reach only Monica. If you need to talk, Linda said, my door is open. Her tone carried the weight of someone who knew how policy worked and where it failed. Monica gave the smallest nod. She did not say she was used to this. She did not say it would be fine. She wiped the last faint line of moisture from the floor, moved the sign, and nudged the cart forward. The motion steadied her. By mid-morning, the snow began to think about being snow. It pressed itself into the air, not yet willing to fall, a bright haze that made the windows look like they had been breathed upon. The lobby's rhythm returned to normal. Delivery people rolled cars across the tile and left trails that dried without notice. A woman wearing a scarf the color of autumn leaves spoke into a phone about pecans and shipping times. Someone read a newspaper and folded it cleanly. In that satisfying ordinariness, Monica found her footing again. She paused by the coffee kiosk to refill the water in her spray bottle. The barista slid a paper cup toward her, steam curling from the top. On the house, he said. Hot water for your thermos. He lowered his voice. And maybe a tea bag if you need it. She smiled. Thank you. She placed a tip in a little glass jar. Coins touched glass. A cheerful sound. Kindness often sounded smaller than it was. Near the windows, a mother in a wool coat helped a child into mittens. The child pressed both hands to the glass and announced to no one in particular that winter was here. It reminded Monica of a different winter in a different place, when she had promised herself that if she ever got to live in the city again, she would try to belong to it. Belonging was not a gift. It was a craft, part patience, part work, part the courage not to shrink when someone suggested you should. She made her rounds through the lobby's edges and then back to the center, attention tuned to the floors. Subtle changes, a scratch here, a smudge there, a small piece of grit you could feel through the soles of shoes. When strangers speak of dignity, they often mean posture or tone. She had learned it was an accumulation of choices so small, most never saw them. It could live in how you place a caution sign, how you reply to a tone meant to make you bow, how you refuse to scuff the edges of yourself to fit a space that pretended you were temporary. The elevators opened again with their soft silver sigh. Richard stepped out, alone this time. He moved toward the doors as if he intended to leave, then veered toward the spot where she was polishing the last of the brass. He looked around as though inventorying witnesses. Power often prefers an audience. Not too large, not too sympathetic, just enough to make sure a message reaches the right ears. You still here? He said, a statement dressed as surprise. I am, she answered. He gestured to the rail. Immaculate now. That stands to reason, he said. When there are standards, she did not rise to the bait. He waited for resistance and, not finding any he could swat at, created his own. You know, he said, lowering his voice so it seemed intimate, friendly even. Some people are grateful for the work that's given to them. They don't confuse it with a seat at the table. It keeps things orderly. Order. The word tasted different in the mouths of different people. For him, it meant a ladder no one should climb unless he handed them the rung. For her, it meant no one slipped on a wet floor. We all like order, she agreed. It means people get home safe. His eyes sharpened, narrowing to pale slits that gave away more than he wanted them to. The mask slid again, and for a breath, the lobby saw him clearly. He did not like the way she kept her footing on a floor he had hoped to make slippery. He did not like that her calm steadied her when he meant to unbalance her. Just remember your place, he said. He meant the words to fall like a gavel. She let them fall and did not pick them up. Silence did more than reply. It widened the room, made space for everyone to notice the shape of what had been said. Behind her, the revolving door hissed. At Ethan's station, a light blinked and stopped. The woman at the kiosk lined up lids in tidy stacks. The building listened. He stepped back, perhaps satisfied, perhaps not. and turned toward the doors again. The winter light found his profile and flattened it. He paused with one hand on the bar of the revolving door and looked back as if making an inventory one more time of who had been present to witness who he believed he was. Monica looked at Richard, her calm eyes holding a banked fire, as if she had just accepted a battle. The lobby regained its usual rhythm by late morning, but upstairs the air held a different charge, a sense that something set in the bright marble had slipped into the veins of the building. On the 20th floor, the hum of printers and the soft thud of file drawers formed a quiet percussion behind conversations about budgets and holiday schedules. Frost traced the corners of the windows, and beyond the glass the lake lay the color of pewter. The callback to the morning lingered in memory. A polite greeting bent into a command, a reminder to keep to a place. The day did not forget, it only changed its tone. Monica rode the elevator with her cart. The bottle caps tightened. The cloths folded into neat squares. She was scheduled to tidy a conference room between meetings and to make a quick pass through the corridor where executives like to leave paper cups on tables as if they vanished by magic. The goal for her was simple, and today, quietly firm. Do the work as always, and keep a steady line through what followed. She told herself not to rehearse the moment in the lobby, not to file it again and again. But the memory was persistent. Restraint lived beside it like a hand on the shoulder. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. A desk calendar showed the slow march toward Thanksgiving, each day penciled with notes about travel and menus. Someone had pinned a recipe for sweet potato casserole to a cork board, the margin full of substitutions and the word pecans underlined twice. Down the corridor, a pair of managers held a door while a catering cart rolled in, with sandwiches wrapped in tidy paper. Please and thank you moved between them with the ease of habit. Linda Chang stepped out of her office as Monica approached. Her posture was composed, but her eyes carried the alertness of someone who had already had a difficult conversation and was bracing for another. She gestured Monica inside and closed the door to soften the hallway's noise. The blinds emitted a gray wash of daylight that made the room feel honest. I saw what happened this morning, Linda said. Her tone was even, not pitying. I am sorry. Monica nodded once. Thank you. I am all right. Linda folded her hands on the desk, then unfolded them as if even gestures had to be thoughtful. I want you to know the handbook by heart as much as I do, she said. We have policies. We have a duty to apply them. When someone with power tests the boundaries, it becomes harder to make the policies do their job. Monica stood with her shoulders easy and her gaze steady. I understand, she said. I wish I could say, leave it to me, and it will be resolved by this afternoon, Linda added, a hint of dry humor softening the edge. But there is pressure. There are meetings where voices carry farther than they should. If anything unusual happens, schedule changes. Sudden complaints tell me. Put everything in writing. It sounds tedious. It is also protective. Monica said. Also, Linda continued, there is a room full of people who do not sign big checks, but who keep this place alive. You know their names. Some of them know yours. That matters, more than we admit in glossy reports. I am not saying lean on them. I am saying you are not without company. The words landed like a blanket over cold shoulders. Monica felt both gratitude and a quiet caution. Company was comfort and risk. Thank you, she said again. A light knock at the open door broke the moment. Ethan stood in the threshold with the careful balance of a person who wanted to help without barging in. He held a small stack of visitor badges and the sign-in sheet. Sorry, he said, and he meant it. They asked me to bring these up. Come in, Linda said, and took the badges. She gave him a nod that said she recognized his presence, not just the errand. Thank you, Ethan. See? Bye. See? He lingered a half-second, eyeing Monica with a concern he tried to hide. Then he left, and the hallway gathered him back. When Monica returned to the corridor, the tone had cooled. She felt it before she could name it. A shift in how footsteps approached and passed, a glance that skimmed over her and then away. At the end of the hall, a man she recognized from the leasing team turned into a doorway when he saw her. It was small, barely a motion, and still it marked a line. Near the copy room, two assistants lowered their voices mid-sentence and smiled too wide when she drew near, a reflex that tasted of apology and avoidance at the same time. She wheeled her cart to the conference room and found the coffee ring on the table that had not been there earlier. Someone had set a napkin over it, as if covering a mistake erased it. She lifted the napkin, dampened the cloth, and worked the circle until the wood was clean. On the credenza, a tablet lay in sleep mode. A second passed, and then a small green light flickered on the edge of a camera tucked into the bezel. She held still, listening with her eyes. The light winked once more and went dark. It could have been a software update. It could have been attention no one had asked permission to pay. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and the screen showed an email from building services marked urgent. The subject line asked for clarification about her start time and whether she had deviated from procedure in the lobby that morning. The message body was polite, populated with words like inquiry and alignment. She read it twice. She typed a calm reply with the time she had clocked in and the sequence of tasks performed, and copied Linda. Facts had their own backbone. She sent the email and put the phone away. By early afternoon, a light snow began to commit to falling, small flakes drifting past the windows in a steady, tired way. In the break area, someone arranged packets of cocoa beside the coffee machine, and another person set out a plate of store-bought cookies with a note that said, "Help yourself." The ordinary kindnesses made an argument against the morning, quiet, and stubborn. Monica refilled the soap dispenser, replaced a crooked hand towel, and moved on. Work was not a shield, but it was a structure. Near the elevator bank, she crossed paths with Richard. He was flanked by a pair of executives, their faces arranged for conversation. He did not slow. He did not look. That choice was a sentence all its own. After he passed, one of the executives let his gaze drop briefly to her cart and then away again with a tightness in his mouth that suggested he had swallowed a question he lacked the courage to ask. On the next pass through the hallway, she noticed a custodial checklist on a clipboard that had been marked with a new column, timestamps in neat handwriting in places no one had required before. She trailed the ink with her eyes and did not touch the pen dangling from the string. If this was oversight, she would give it no room to become accusation. She signed where signatures were customary and left the rest to the line of her work. She took a late break and walked downstairs to the lobby kiosk for a cup of tea, the kind that leaned floral and calmed the chest. She handed over a few bills, and the barista slid a couple back with a small shake of the head and a glance that said, quietly, "We all saw, and we all live here too." She tucked the bills into the tip jar anyway. Generosity moved in both directions, and saying no to it often wounded the giver. On her way back, she paused near the windows. Lakefront wind pushed snow in soft diagonals, and the sidewalk took on a thin sugar crust that made footsteps crisp. A couple holding shopping bags hurried past, laughing about a list they had forgotten on the kitchen counter. A bus hissed to a stop, kneeling to let a passenger climb aboard. The city, in its stubbornness and grace, kept its promises as best it could. When she returned to the 20th floor, Linda met her in the corridor with a brief nod and a quiet update. "I logged your email," she said. "If anyone asks, you did everything by procedure. That matters." The look in her eyes said more. Keep records. Keep steady. Keep breathing. Monica finished her tasks before the hour most offices began to empty. Coats appeared on chairbacks. Goodbyes rose and fell. A meeting let out with the muffled scrape of chairs and the lull of polite laughter. She was headed toward the service elevator when Ethan appeared at her side, not suddenly, just as if the building had arranged their paths to cross. He walked with her for a few steps, as if escorting her was the most natural thing in the world. He stared straight ahead and kept his voice low, gentle enough not to carry. "If you need, I can help. I'm not afraid of him." Evening settled over the park with a soft hush, and the city's lights stitched a warm edge along the dark. The memory of a young guard's promise lingered like a steady drumbeat. "If you need, I can help." "I'm not afraid of him," an echo that nudged Monica toward company instead of solitude. She chose a table at the front window of Millennium Café, where steam fogged the glass and the clink of cups made its own gentle choir. The goal was simple and clear in her mind. Shape a small circle of trust, compare notes, and decide how to stand without stumbling. Out past the window, the famous sculpture curved like a polished horizon, reflecting strangers who waved at their own shy silhouettes. Inside, an autumn sign promised pumpkin spice, and a chalkboard reminded patrons to tip kindly. It smelled of cinnamon, espresso, and the city's favorite stubbornness. Ethan arrived first, shoulders squared in an attempt at calm, a wool scarf looped twice at his throat. He ordered tea, thanked the barista, and tipped with careful bills, as if each was a way of voting for decency. Samantha came next, her hair tucked behind her ears, eyes bright with fatigue and something stronger. She carried a folder the way a person carries a photograph she has not decided to show. Linda joined a moment later, setting her phone face down, her posture saying that, for at least a little while, this conversation mattered more than unanswered email. The four of them made a circle that fit neatly inside the cafe's low hum. They spoke softly, choosing words that did not spook the moment. Ethan went first, his voice level. He told them about the morning on the 20th floor, about emails with tight phrases like alignment, and about the new boxes on the checklist that had never needed extra boxes. Samantha listened and nodded, fingers wrapped around a cup she did not drink from. Monica added a few details what the camera light had done, how silence in the hallway can sound crowded when people decide not to meet your eyes. Linda listened like someone taking a careful photograph of the truth. Write down the when and the where, she said, and send me copies. Facts resist being relocated when they are written down. I will keep a record. Conversation found a slower gear. Samantha exhaled, set the folder on the table, and touched its edge with her fingertips. My brother served, she said. He did 2 tours. He used to call from overseas, not often, but when he did, his voice had this steady thread in it. He would say, "Do the next right thing, Sam." After he died, the officer told us he did exactly that. That voice is why I am here. She opened the folder to show a small handful of note dates, times, brief descriptions in neat handwriting. I am not brave the way he was, she added, but I can keep track. I can press record on my phone. I can tell the truth without shouting. The words were simple, but the weight behind them settled over the table like a promise made to someone who will hear it. Monica thanked her with a look that acknowledged both loss and offering. Quiet does not mean small, that look said. Linda, practical as ever, spoke in terms that felt gentle even while they were sharp. There is risk, she said. I will not pretend there is not. He has influence. He has friends who owe him favors. And when people like that feel their certainty tilt, they sometimes reach outside the building for help. I do not say this to frighten you. I say it so we all understand the ground. She named the ground with the same care a hiker uses when pointing out a patch of ice. Attention is safety. Ethan leaned forward without fidgeting, a soldier's son posture in the young man's frame. We can set boundaries he cannot push without leaving footprints, he said softly. If meetings happen, we choose open doors. If messages come, we reply with policy, language, and copy the right people. I can walk Monica to her car on late nights. I can make sure cameras are working in the places that matter. He glanced at Monica, not to ask permission to protect her, but to ask permission to stand beside her. She gave it with a small nod. While they spoke, a man at a nearby table turned a page of his magazine without moving his eyes. His coat was too heavy for indoors, his hat brim low enough to make his attention ambiguous. He sipped slowly, left no tip, and adjusted his chair by an inch toward their table. In the café, inches can say many things. Monica noticed the movement and placed it on the internal map. He could have been nobody. He could have been a pair of borrowed ears. Experience taught her to respect both possibilities without inviting either to take up residence in her thoughts. She lowered her voice by a shade and angled her chair so she could see his reflection in the window without staring. They shifted to practical steps. Samantha proposed a simple code over text for moments when help was needed. 2 words, plain and unalarming, that could trigger a phone call and a presence. Linda suggested specific phrases that invoked company policy without sounding combative. We are not describing a battle, she said. We are describing a boundary. The sentence sat there, steady as a fence post driven deep and true. Ethan, thinking ahead, offered to test the route to the garage lights and ensure the path from elevator to car had no dark corners. Truth likes good lighting, he said with a small smile, and for a beat the table's tension eased. They placed their cups back on saucers with a soft tap that happens when people agree, for now, on what can be agreed upon. Outside, The wind mused over whether to bring real snow or a fine mist of it. Inside, a child negotiated with a parent for one more cookie, then accepted half and grinned as if a treaty had been signed. The city moved its many hands, some generous, some careless, most simply busy. Monica reached for her coat. "Thank you," she said, and the words meant more than gratitude for company. They meant, thank you for treating this as something that can be named without being minimized, for bringing receipts, for understanding that dignity is not a decoration. Linda buttoned her jacket and reminded them to send notes before sleep so the day could be captured while it was still warm. Samantha slipped the folder back into her bag like a small, guarded flame. Ethan stepped ahead to open the door, his body language careful not to box Monica in. They walked out into the early night, where the sculpture gleamed like a polished winter moon, and the plaza echoed with the steps of couples taking photos before dinner. Monica breathed in the crisp air and the faint sweetness from a nearby cart roasting nuts. She felt the good ache of having done one right thing, naming the problem without feeding it. The man from the Café slid out into the night a minute later, pausing to check his phone, then drifting the way a person drifts when he wants to be unremarkable. Monica saw him and placed his movement on the same map as before. Awareness is not fear, it is a kind of composure. They reached the curb where the row of parked cars were a dusting of white like a thin shawl. Monica clicked her fob and the car lights blinked. She lifted the wiper to clear a sliver of slush and saw the rectangle of paper tucked underneath, folded once, the crease sharp as if pressed with a thumbnail. She knew even before she opened it that it would not be a coupon for coffee. She unfolded the note and read the block letters that tried to disguise the hand that wrote them. When they left the cafes, a note was tucked under Monica's windshield wiper. Know your place and disappear. 好不来. The garage took in the evening like a deep breath and held it. Concrete pillars stood in rows like patient trees, and the echo of a distant door made the space sound older than it was. The note from the cafe rolled with Monica all the way down, folded into her coat pocket, the crease sharp as a thought she refused to soften. It was the shadow of the warning that had slid beneath her wiper. The thread pulled forward from a quiet table where company had felt like a small victory. She had come here for a simple purpose, to reach her car and to show herself she would not be chased from the ordinary rhythm of leaving work. Tonight's aim was firm and narrow. Walk, look, decide, and keep both courage and caution intact. Coat lay along the floor in a thin sheet. The overhead lights hummed, some steady, some with a tired flicker. Near the far exit, a film of sleet shimmered where the wind found a seam. The city above was all holiday windows and early dinners. Down here, the soundscape belonged to key fobs, heels on concrete, and engines that coughed awake. She could hear none of that now. She could feel it, though, as a pattern missing a beat. Ethan walked a step to her left, not crowding, not announcing himself as a shield. His eyes kept an easy sweep, casual enough that a passerby would read nothing in it, careful enough that nothing escaped. Samantha kept to Monica's right, scarf up against her chin, gloved hands tucked together. She tried to look brave and did not realize she already did. I keep hearing my brother, she said softly, the words clouding into the air. Do the next right thing. Monica gave a slight nod. The phrase fit the evening like a guideline painted along a floor. They had not gone far when movement resolved into men at the edges of their path. Not a crowd, not a rush, just presence sharpening from shadows. Vince Moretti stepped forward first. A coat that looked too new, a smile that never reached his eyes. Two others unfolded from behind the length of a parked SUV, one to either side, and the sound of a third set of footsteps came from behind them, casual in a way that asked to be believed. Well now, Vince said lightly, as if greeting neighbors, as if all this had been scheduled. Long day? Monica stopped with care and let her breath steady before she trusted her voice. I am going to my car, she said. You will let us pass. That depends, Vince answered, almost friendly, on how much trouble you want to buy with that determination. He tipped his head toward the exit, a gesture that said he owned directions. Here's what's smart. You take a little time off. You reconsider your place in the grand order. You stop making life complicated for people who like it simple. Bay, R. Ethan's posture altered by a fraction, attention gathering at the edges, hands open and visible at his sides. "We are leaving," he said, voice even, like a man reading a weather report. "You will not step closer." Vince considered him with faint amusement. "I admire the tone. You ever think about acting? Sometimes a voice like that is all you need to change a room." He let the compliment hang, then let it curdle. "Not tonight." "Oh." Samantha slid her phone into her palm under the hem of her coat. Camera already set, the little red light covered by wool. Her pulse climbed, but her hands were steady. Grief had taught her that steadiness sometimes arrives when you do not order it. She angled herself so that Linda's taught phrases could travel through her if needed. Open doors, policy words, the calm insistence on boundaries. "We are on company property," she said, surprising herself with the strength in the sentence. "Security has protocols. Cameras exist. Cameras sleep," one of the men behind the SUV answered. The words casual, almost bored. People forget to wake them. Frown. Monica took in the angles. Columns, cars, lines of sight, paths that narrowed or opened. The old habits rearranged themselves without asking permission, not to invite a fight, but to bring order to a map that needed clarity. "You do not want to be here when this is over," she said to Vince, still soft, still steady. "You especially do not want your face on any record with the words that have already been said to me today." He laughed once. "It made no mark on the air. People like me do not appear on records unless we choose to," he said. "People like you are lucky when the records even spell your names right." The sentence landed with the weight it had been designed to carry. It reached back into rooms with closed doors and long tables, and men who liked the sound of their own comfort. It reached forward toward headlines that begin with the wrong details. Monica refused to bend under it. "My name fits in every space I enter," she said. "I make sure of that." He let the smile fall away. "Last offer," he said, as if any of this had been a negotiation. "Turn around, walk away. We do not want to bruise anyone's holiday plans. We only want to put a thought in the air you breathe. Know your place." Samantha flinched, the note from the café flaring in her mind like a match. Ethan moved a half step, not to block, but to be seen on a line with Monica, an equation written out where anyone could read it, together, not behind. Monica felt a tide of old discipline against her ribs, not a drum of alarm, but a metronome. "We are going to the car," she repeated. "You can choose to be decent." For a heartbeat, it seemed possible that the man might simply step aside, that the bluster had been rented for an evening and would be returned, unworn. Then the temperature of the moment dropped. Vince's jaw tightened at the hinge, eyes flattening like ice. He turned his palm up in a small signal, and the two men to his flanks shifted, not lunging, not grabbing, just angling to close space. Ethan lifted a hand slightly in a gesture used by patient traffic cops and people who still believe in reason. "Don't," he said. It was not a threat. It was a plea given dignity. One of the men bumped Ethan's shoulder as he slipped by. Not an attack, just a nudge designed to steal balance and to claim a right to do so. Ethan stepped back, caught himself, and set his feet. The garage tallied the movement in echoes. Samantha's breath stuttered. She kept her phone low and let the camera drink in feet and posture, not faces, knowing that sometimes lawyers care about feet and posture more than they pretend. "Hey!" A voice called from the far ramp. A maintenance worker appeared at the top of the incline, pushing a barrel on wheels, the big roll of plastic liners jiggling as he walked. He paused, taking in the geometry below, then continued down with the unhurried pace of a man who has decided not to see what will get him in trouble to acknowledge. His presence altered the math. Vince noticed and recalculated with a tiny twitch in his cheek. Monica used the moment. "We will walk together," she said to Ethan and Samantha. "We will not run. We will not speak again." She began to move, neither slow nor fast, the way people move when they refuse to be herded. Ethan matched her, and Samantha did too. The three of them a small island of intention. Vince let them pass him by 2 paces, then turned and walked behind at the distance of a shadow that has decided to become a person. He did not touch, did not crowd. He simply took the sound of their steps and spliced it with his own. The way a turn of a dial can bring an unwanted station into the music you were listening to. "See," he said, lightly, almost cheerful. "Choices, you made one, I made one." They reached the car. Monica clicked the fob and the lights answered with a small blink. Ethan positioned himself by the driver's side, palm out, inviting the door to open between trouble and the person leaving. Samantha circled to the passenger side, phone lowered, thumb ready to send a message that would summon Linda's careful storm if needed. Monica put her hand on the handle and paused. Through the glass, she caught her own reflection, layered with the line of man behind them, the concrete, the smear of winter at the ramp. It looked like a double exposure of two cities, the one that sends children to school and keeps buses running, and the one that whispers to certain people that their homes do not include certain rooms. Vince stopped at a polite distance. The thing about standards, he said, back to the word his employer had used earlier, is they can work in both directions. You cross a line, somebody cross it back, just to show symmetry. World stays balanced that way. Monica opened the door. Balance is not the same as justice, she said. And symmetry is not the same as fairness. You talk pretty, he answered. But pretty gets tired. It is easier to be quiet. He turned his head as if listening to weather. Storm coming. Somewhere above, a car alarm chirped and silenced itself. The maintenance worker reached the barrel's destination, replaced the liner with the steady rhythm of a man who has decided his job is to keep the small things working. He glanced their way again, then focused on his own circle of light. Monica slid into her seat without hurry. Ethan closed the door with care, not a slam, a seal. Samantha lifted her phone and, in a move that felt like breathing, hit send on the text that meant eyes would widen in other rooms. Vince gave a tip of an invisible hat, as if etiquette had been satisfied. We will be in touch, he said. The phrase tried to sound like customer service and sounded instead like his neighbor. He turned away, his heels making dry whispers on the concrete, his man flowing with him back into the edges of vision where shadows wait. Silence pulled. Monica sat with her hands on the wheel, fingers uncurled, breathing a practice she had learned in rooms that had nothing in common with this one except the need to choose what to do next. Ethan leaned toward the window, his voice low through the glass. You did well, he said. You kept the line. Samantha exhaled and rested her forehead against the cool metal of the doorframe for a second, her scarf smelling of wool and cinnamon from the Café. The garage, which had felt deserted a few minutes earlier, now felt crowded with the unseen traffic of decisions. A motor turned over somewhere below, a door thudded at the far stairwell. Air moved differently, as if the building had shifted its weight from one foot to the other. In that pause, the sound arrived the way weather does when it finally makes up its mind. The wail of police sirens rose from far off, blue and red washing the concrete. But no one knew whether they were coming to help or to smother the truth. Sirens arrived like a weather front, their echo sliding along the concrete and rolling to a stop beside the line of pillars. Blue and red pulsed across car doors and glass, turning the garage into a slow-moving kaleidoscope. The uncertainty from moments before was still hanging in the air, a question without an answer. Then the elevator doors opened and the hum of voices spilled out. Building staff, a reporter from upstairs who had been packing up for the night, a couple of residents who had followed the lights to see what the commotion was, and Linda with her coat unbuttoned and her expression composed. The memory of the note on the windshield and the voices in the shadows felt close enough to touch. But the scene had tilted. It now had witnesses. Monica stepped out of her car and stood where the light found her. Ethan positioned himself nearby, not as a wall but as a point of steadiness. Samantha kept her scarf snug around her neck and lifted her phone, the camera angled wide to drink in the layout, not just the faces. The goal in Monica's mind was simple, like a sentence she had practiced. Speak only what is necessary. Stand where truth is easiest to see, and let evidence do the heavy lifting. Two officers approached with the calm pace of people who had seen 100 versions of confusion. They asked for names, for a summary, for the kind of facts that fit on a form later. Before anyone could give the evening a cleaner shape, Richard's voice reached them from the ramp. He descended without hurry, his shoes clicking like punctuation. He wore the smile he kept for donors and ribbon cuttings, and he spoke as if narrating an inconvenience someone else had failed to manage. There seems to be a misunderstanding, he said to the officers. My team reported a disturbance. The building has standards. We were merely ensuring safety in a space that has had issues. Monica did not move. Linda closed the distance to stand within earshot of everyone who needed to hear. The building has policies, she said evenly, and they apply to everyone. She held a small folder to her chest like a book she intended to read from. Richard's gaze flicked to Samantha's phone and then to Ethan's posture and finally to Monica's face. You again, he said, the pleasant tone dropping a degree. I thought we had discussed keeping things orderly. He gave the officers a look meant to fold them into his version. She has been disruptive. This has gone on long enough. 还未. Samantha's thumb hovered over the screen. She did not raise her voice, but she let the audio catch his words with clarity. We are on company property, she said, calling back a line from the Cafés, a line that sounded steadier now, and we are documenting this moment. Linda lifted her chin toward Tom from IT who had just arrived, cheeks flushed from the cold. He gave a tiny nod and held up his own phone where a progress bar edged across the screen. Cameras do not sleep, he murmured to Linda, just loud enough for the officers to hear. Backups are awake. She took a breath that looked like relief and readiness combined. Richard laughed softly, the sound like glass touched with a fingernail. You cannot possibly think anyone who matters will take the word of a janitor and a handful of friends over the judgment of this company's leadership. He gestured toward the officers with an open palm. We would like our garage cleared. This is private property. Linda met the officer's eyes and, with the same precise politeness she used in boardrooms, said, We would like your assistance documenting what happened. There have been threats. Employees feel unsafe. I have emails you should see. She turned to Samantha. And please send the files now. Samantha tapped, and the stream of data went where it was supposed to go. To Linda, to Tom, to a private cloud folder whose name would not give away its purpose, and to a trusted reporter who had given Linda her card months ago with the words, If anything ever seems wrong, call. The reporter from upstairs really just a local stringer who lived in the building and carried a camera. Because old habits were hard to break, took a half step closer. Mind if I capture ambient? He asked no one in particular, public interest and all. Richard gave him a look that tried to sync the request with disapproval. The reporter simply adjusted a lens and let his face remain courteous. Richard chose a new tactic. He aimed his words at the officers in a lower register, like a man asking for a small favor. She is not who she says she is, he said, meaning Monica. She is an agitator. She has been disrespectful. She is escalating the situation for attention. Monica felt the familiar press of anger at the edge of her ribs and let it pass like a wave that would not own her. She looked at Linda, who gave the slightest nod, as if to say, It is time to put the cards on the table. Monica turned to the officers and to the witnesses who had grown out of the floor like the building had decided to provide them. Her voice carried without effort. It had that steady thread Samantha had described. I am Monica Harris, she said. I work here with pride, and I have always done my job with care. I have asked for respect that should belong to everyone who works in this place. She let the breath rest in her chest and go. Before this job, I served this country for 20 years. I wore a uniform. I led people. I kept my head when keeping it mattered. After an operation that saved lives, I received a national decoration for bravery, presented by the president in a simple ceremony. It is not something I carry like a trophy. It is something I live up to. Silence came in like a tide that pulls everything toward itself for a count of 5. The garage seemed to widen. A couple who had been whispering stopped. One of the officers straightened by a fraction, the kind of instinct that honors service without deciding what to do with it. The reporter's eyebrows lifted, then lowered as his camera found a cleaner frame. Ethan was very still, the kind of still that says relief and admiration at once. Richard's face did not know which part of itself to be. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man who had stepped into the wrong room and only just realized it. Then his features arranged themselves into something hard and bright. This is theater, he said, not to the officers now, but to the room, to any ear that might be floating in it. Now we are telling stories. Now we are playing the veteran card for sympathy. You people always know which strings to pull when you want to look like victims. He had miscalculated. The words were old and rotten at the core, and when he set them out in the light, their smell filled the space. Samantha's phone caught every syllable. The reporter's camera did too. and the neighbor at the edge of the scene actually flinched the way a person does when a dish slips and shatters. Linda's posture did not change, but something in her gaze went colder and cleaner. The officers traded a look that said they had seen this pattern wear many coats. One of them spoke, voice neutral, professional. "Sir, we will need to gather statements. Please refrain from inflammatory comments." He turned to Monica. "Ma'am, do you require medical assistance? Do you feel threatened now?" "I am steady," she said, "but I would like to file a report." She glanced at Linda, who held up the folder as if it were made of ballast. "We have documentation," Linda said. "Video, emails, a note left at her car this evening." Tom stepped forward and, with the practiced care of someone handling a newborn file, displayed a still frame from the garage cameras routed to the backup, men stepping from shadow into light, posture that said something without needing faces. "Copy twice," he added. "Metadata intact." Richard, feeling the room drifting from his anchor, reached for outrage and dragged it into the open. "So now the building's own staff are conspiring against me?" he asked, voice rising. "You are staging things. You are setting me up. This is a witch hunt led by a janitor who thinks a mop and a stair make her the equal of people who actually run something." His hand cut the air as if erasing the people in it. She fits the type, always ready to claim she has been wronged, always finding a way to play identity and get attention. None, 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 none. The sentence echoed, then settled into the concrete, where later people would say, "I remember standing right there when he said it." Samantha did not move, but her camera moved the way cameras do when the story sharpens. She whispered, "We have it," and sent a live clip to the reporter upstairs, to Linda, and to a small list of contacts she trusted not to use it carelessly. Monica did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "I am not your type," she said. "I am a person, and I am not playing at anything. I am asking that this place honor the standards it prints in its handbook. That includes not hiring men to frighten employees into silence." "Outrageous," Richard snapped, but the word fell flat. He had given away too much. The performance had slipped, and the less practiced self stood there, throwing sparks that did not light anything. He tried again with a smoother face. "This conversation is over," he told the officers, as if he could end the scene by declaring it ended. "Clear the area. We will handle this internally." The officer was courteous but unmoved. "We will take statements," he repeated, "and if there are threats, we will document them. That is not internal." One of Vince's men lingered at the line where shadow thickened near the ramp. He glanced toward Richard, then subtly decided that the night now belonged to other people. He turned and went up into the slice of air where cold waited like a clean sheet. The building exhaled. Linda made a call and kept her voice low. The reporter upstairs began to post careful captions, simple facts, no barbed adjectives. Samantha stood close to Monica, not touching, presence enough. Ethan watched the edges, the way a person does, who knows trouble, prefers doorways. Richard tried one more angle, to make the officers doubt what they heard by questioning motives. "This is about me," he said, his tone taking on a kind of practiced sorrow. "I am a target because I hold people accountable, because I expect standards. And now everyone here wants their moment. Everyone wants to use my name to get attention. They have turned a simple request for order into a vendetta." Linda had heard enough. "Accountability is not the same as humiliation," she said. "Standards are not the same as cruelty. You know the difference." She did not add, "And you chose otherwise." She did not have to. The room had already decided. The officers began their slow work. Names, times, copies of screenshots, emails forwarded. Monica answered questions and did not embroider. She did not tell the story of the decoration. She had said enough. When the officer asked for her middle initial, she gave it. When he asked if she feared retaliation, she said, "I expect it, which is why I'm standing here." The gross cold had crept into people's hands. Someone passed around paper cups of coffee from a tray that had appeared like an act of mercy. The steam rose, and conversation took on a neighborly quality in the strange way that crises sometimes produce community. The reporters' post gathered comments, some predictable, some quietly astonished. On Samantha's screen, a message from a colleague pinged. "Is this real?" She answered with a single word. "Yes." In the midst of it, Monica felt the kind of quiet that comes after long-held breath is finally released. She was not naive. She understood that tomorrow could bring hard emails and careful threats and friends who suddenly could not make eye contact in elevators. She understood that Richard had resources and a talent for dressing impatience as principle. But she also understood something larger had moved. People had seen, and the scene was already gathering itself into a shape beyond the building's walls. She looked at Linda and at Ethan and at Samantha. Their faces carried fatigue and resolve and a shine in the eye that comes when a fear has been named and does not grow in the dark anymore. She thought of all the quiet jobs that keep a city standing, of hands that wipe, lift, sort, tally, welcome, and fix. She thought of her oath from years ago, the one that did not end when she hung the uniform in the closet. She had not chosen this fight, but she recognized it for what it was, a matter of dignity, which is to say, a matter of belonging. The reporter checked his phone, blinked at the number of alerts, and then looked up with a small, tilted smile that was not gloating. It was wonder. The city was already telling itself the story out loud. After a few steady breaths, Samantha lifted her phone one last time to frame Monica with the officers in the background, and Linda just in the edge of the shot, the image of a small circle holding firm. She hit send, and the clip slid into timelines like a light turned on in a long hallway. News and hashtag number justice for Monica spread across Chicago within hours, forcing national media to pay attention. The apartment on the south side held warmth the way a good quilt holds sleep, and the night beyond the windows wore a soft shawl of snow that kept slipping from the sky in gentle threads. The day's storm of attention had moved through the city like a front and left a clearer air behind it. The clip from the garage had settled on living room screens and kitchen radios, and neighbors who had only ever nodded in the hallway now offered longer glances that meant respect. Monica set the small table with steady hands roasted turkey sliced with care, sweet potatoes glossed with a hint of maple, green beans bright with lemon, a round loaf that cracked when Preston lit one candle, its flame a quiet echo of courage rather than ceremony. Ethan arrived first, coat dusted with snow, carrying a thermal carafe and a paper bag that released the bakery's warm, yeasty breath when opened. He thanked her for the invitation with the plain sincerity she had come to trust. Samantha followed, cheeks pink from the cold, a python held like a careful promise, and a smile that found room for grief and relief in the same expression. Linda came last, slipping free of the city's wind, her posture still composed even in a space that had no need of armor. She set her phone face down and said, with a softness that made it true, that for the next few hours work could chase its own tail without them. Monica's daughter, small and alert and curious, helped carry plates from the counter to the table, counting them in a whisper as if the numbers were a kind of calm spell. When Samantha showed her how to fold napkins into easy shapes, the child followed along with the seriousness of an apprentice. They settled, and the room took on that particular Thanksgiving hush that comes just before people choose their words. The television murmured from the corner, with closed captions on and volume low, a crawl of headlines that had learned, for once, to choose accuracy over hurry. A newsreader announced that the board had voted to suspend Richard from his duties pending investigation. The language was cautious in the way institutions speak, but the meaning was plain enough that even the child paused to hear it. Monica did not gloat. She did not climb the story like a ladder. She simply let the sentence land and then pass, one footfall among others. Ethan poured hot cider into mugs, the steam carrying cinnamon and apple into the corners, and raised his cup with a small nod that said, "Gratitude is not a performance, it is a habit." Linda shared, with careful brevity, that statements had been filed, that the camera backups were secure in 3 places, that the union steward had reached out to ask how to help. Samantha offered a brief sketch of the messages she had received from coworkers' notes that said, "We saw, we are sorry, we will stand straighter, being careful to name no one, because safety is also a habit." When Monica thanked them, she did it the way people who have endured learn to thank, not as payment, not as debt, but as recognition that kindness had moved through the room like a tide that leaves brightness on the shore. They ate without rushing. The turkey was tender, the sweet potatoes smooth, the beans crisp enough to remind the teeth of something living. Monica's daughter told a short story about a school project that asked for a drawing of a brave person. She had drawn her mother holding a broom like a banner and a floor sign like a shield, and everyone at the table laughed softly. Not at the image, but at the way truth arrives in shapes a child can carry. Linda, coaxed by the child's attention, told the memory of her own grandmother showing her how to fold dumplings, a lesson in patience that lived in her hands even now. Ethan listened the way he always listened, making room in his mind for the small anchor of another person's past. Samantha spoke about her brother in a few careful sentences, each one strung to the next by the thread he had placed in her life. Do the next right thing. The room held the name of the dead as if it were a warm stone. As dinner gave way to pie and then to that good silence that comes after, Monica turned the television fully down and the candle's flame seemed to grow in the quiet. She looked at each face and said what she had planned to say, though she had not written it down. That belonging is not a chair you are handed, but a table you help steady. That justice is a kind of housekeeping for the soul of a place. That the day had been long and would echo into days ahead. And that she was not afraid of echoes. She did not mention medals or ceremonies. She did not need to. Ethan answered by offering to check her car before he left. Not because fear ruled him, but because care did. Linda promised to stop by in the morning with a copy of the formal complaint, signed and sealed. Her voice made bureaucracy sound, for a moment, like a form of love. Samantha stacked plates and carried them to the sink, humming a tune that had no name and needed none. When Monica's daughter asked if the grown-ups would stay for a little while longer, no one hurried to say no. The evening thinned. Snow collected on the sill and drew the city closer. Messages arrived and were answered with brief, gentle replies. A neighbor knocked to deliver a small dish of cranberries and the sentence that carried decades of Chicago kitchens. If you need anything, just call down the hall. The child fell asleep on the couch beneath a blanket with a pattern of stars. Her breathing evening out until it matched the apartment's slow heartbeat. The adults spoke more quietly then, stringing together plans that were less about fighting and more about tending, documenting and resting, checking on those who might be frightened, making sure tomorrow had handrails. Linda reminded them that courage without sleep trips on its own feet. Ethan promised to return with a new set of flashlights for the car. Samantha wrote down a list of people to thank on Monday and folded it into her pocket like a seed. When it was time to mark the day, they did it simply. Monica lifted her mug of cider and said 2 words that had traveled a long road to reach this room. Happy Thanksgiving. The words did not pretend that all was well. They did not flatten the bends and bruises of the week. They sounded like what they were: gratitude for food and company and breath, gratitude for truth that refuses to stay under a rug, gratitude for a table that had learned to hold more than plates. They drank, and the candle leaned a little as if bowing to the amen that followed. Coats were found, scarves looped, goodbyes given, with that extra beat of pressure in the hug that says, "We will keep showing up." The door closed softly after each friend, and the apartment regained the kind of quiet that does not feel empty. Monica tidied, switching from public steadiness to home steadiness without losing any of herself in the turn. She tucked the child more firmly into the blanket, turned off the television, and stood for a moment with her hand on the back of a chair, feeling the day move through her one last time before it joined the stack of days that had made her. She walked to the window, lifted the blind with 2 fingers, and let the city show her its winter-faced streetlights casting halos on the snow, a bus sighing at the corner, a neighbor laughing to a phone on the stoop downstairs. She breathed in, breathed out, and let the breath carry a promise only she needed to hear. Monica looked out the window, the snow falling softly. Her eyes were calm, yet resolute, ready for whatever challenges life might bring. In the stillness after the storm, when the table had been cleared and the last candle burned low, what lingered was not the noise of conflict, but the quiet strength of people who chose to stand together. Through doubt, threat, and the weight of old prejudice, dignity was carried like a steady flame, reminding us that truth, once spoken, has a way of finding its home. The lesson is simple yet profound. Compassion and courage, even in ordinary hands, can turn walls into doors and bring warmth where fear once lived. Much like the porch light that guides a traveler safely back on a snowy evening, one act of fairness can illuminate a path for many. So, as you reflect on the story, take a moment to notice the silent gifts of kindness that surround you, and if it touched your heart, consider passing that light along to someone waiting in the shadows.